I'm joined now by Jonathan Davis, who is a wealth manager. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Sam.
Why do you think inequality is continuing to rise so much and the standard of living not declining, but certainly, slowing down the increase in standards of living?
Well, this is what I've been talking about for years, and the media has generally laughed at me, but it's the chickens are coming home to roost. You asked the question why. It's because in 2009 we borrowed hundreds of billions of pounds, thousands across the Western world, and bailed out the banking system. We slashed interest rates, again, to help the banking system, and we're still printing money with abandon, so the pound has collapsed. They talked about the pound collapsed because of Brexit. The pound's been collapsing for years. Give you an example. In 2007, you could get over $2 to a pound. Now it's 120, 125. That was nothing to do with Brexit. So in other words, the elite have done fantastically well. And you say, the report says that by 5 years from now, households will be worse off. No, what it says is the average household will be worse off. The elite, the top 10%, will do brilliantly. So what we need to do is reverse the policies, stop printing this money, raise interest rates, and let's get the economy going again. Instead, we're in a general economic depression, which you basically defined as we've had very low growth now for nearly a decade. That actually is a depression.
It's a bit of a malaise for young people as well, because we were talking about this earlier in the office, and I said, when I started out working, or even when I was at university and you're studying hardish, but then certainly when I got into the working world, you spend your years being skin, living hand to mouth, living off overdrafts, working long hours, not being treated that well at times at work, but you have your eyes on a prize. That was the way that I grew up to sort of understand the world. You keep your eyes on the prize. You go through those rough times. There is something waiting for you at the end. You are working towards an end, and to an extent, I feel that was justified. And I did feel that after working hard through those times, I was rewarded with more comfortable times. That was almost like the social contract in a way. That's no longer the case. And when people talk about the snowflake generation or, lazy young people and all this sort of stuff, I sort of think, well, yeah, there's an element of truth in that. But to be honest, where's their motivation? I had the motivation when I was younger. I'm sure you did too, because you were sort of told and taught that if you worked hard, you would be rewarded eventually. I'm not sure with figures such as this, kids today are going to feel like there is any point in them working hard because life just won't get any better.
Well, first of all, the important thing is they've got no alternative. They're going to have to be smarter than our generation, and they're going to have to work harder. That's the reality. They can complain as much as they want, but that's the reality that the politicians and the central banks have brought us to. When we were kids, we didn't have to, well, I don't know about you, but we didn't have to borrow vast amounts of money to go to university. They do now. The cost of living today is huge, largely because of accommodation. When I was a kid, a flat was £25,000, £40,000. Now it's £250,000. And although the interest rates are practically nothing, clearly you have to go massively in debt to get into property. So that is why we need to reverse the decisions, the policies that are going on. We need to let the market set interest rates, which means let them go higher. We need to stop printing money, we need to let the pound rise. What will this result in? It will reduce the cost of living. It will reduce the cost of doing business. That's the way we get economic prosperity. What everyone keeps on saying is, in order to help folk who aren't working, we need to give them more benefits. In order to help the low paid, we need to give them minimum wages. All that's doing is creating more and more inflation and making the end goal that you're talking about even away. Instead, cut the costs of living, cut the costs of doing business. That's the way we're going to help young folk get on in the world. And I know it's exactly the opposite of what everyone's saying, but look, what they're doing has brought us 10 years of economic malaise, and probably another 20 years we need to do a 180-degree reversal.
All right, let me ask you this. Living standards have been on the up for a long time. And this report doesn't suggest...
Not in the last 10 or 15 years.
This doesn't suggest they're in decline. It means the rate has slowed down. Do you think that actually there were decades in the post-war era where the acceleration in standards of living was so great that it almost spoilt us? And in fact, generations shouldn't expect such a huge leap from, you know, the standard of living that their parents enjoyed.
Generations absolutely should expect greater standard of living because of technology, because we can import cheaper goods from low-cost manufacturing countries. There's no question we should expect more. But when you're looking at the question you posed, yes, we had a vast rate of growth in the 1950s, in the 1960s, coming out of the immediate post-war period. But then, what did we have? We had the 1970s, the 3-day week, at 25% inflation. So what happened in the last 40 years? Interest rates and inflation have been falling, and that encouraged people to borrow more and more, until we're now at the stage where debt is absolutely gargantuan, and that is the major problem in the economy, the level of debt. And as I say, if interest rates were higher, then no doubt there would be less debt sloshing around. That in itself would bring down the cost of property. It would also reduce the cost of imports because the pound would rise. Thus, our standard of living would rise. The economy could get going. So we should absolutely expect greater opportunities, but because of the policies, we're not going to have it. And you think it's bad just now? They're talking about the next 5 years. It's going to be even worse in 20 years until and unless there's a great change. And unfortunately, like the unicorn, I'll believe that change when I see it.
Jonathan, as a wealth manager, you must charge quite a lot. I mean, for your services. I mean, are you quite?
For my services, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to pry and ask you to be specific, but are you quite an expensive wealth manager?
Oh gosh.
Are you competitively priced?
That is such it's a question which is really unanswerable. What I can tell you is,
you're playing your cards close to your chest. Let me tell you. I'm not wealthy, so I can't afford a wealth manager. So, to be honest, sometimes when you come on the show, I try to get you by stealth. I try to get you to advise me for free.
Yeah, always happy to do that.
But you'll be happy to know because you once advised me to do this. Do you know what I've done over the last few months? Paid off loads of debts that have been hanging around for ages. Credit cards. Because I asked you once.
Give you a chance to get going.
I said to you, what should I do if I had any money? And you said pay off debts. And I had all sorts of credit cards from the past. That I'd racked up years ago when I was skint, and I'd just forgotten about and paid them all off, haven't I?
And were you still, at that time, were you paying interest on old debt?
I'll be embarrassed to tell you the monthly outgoings that I discovered on my bank statements, which I check extremely rarely, that I was paying to a number of different credit cards and loans, all of which now I've paid off. And the feeling is fantastic.
It is not just the feeling, the emotional feeling, but also the financial opportunity. Do you know what you should do now?
Go to Las Vegas and go mental.
Well, that's one alternative.
Oh, okay.
As a professional wealth advisor, what I, however, would suggest, given your prior level of expenditure included all that interest, now that interest is gone, sure, by all means, increase your standard of living, but also put it into your pension.
Yeah, I will do that. Now I'm saving a load of money every month that would have been going in there. I've got to put it somewhere else. And maybe it will go to pension. That sounds really exciting. No, I will do that. Jonathan,
you're going to retire at some point, Sam.
Oh, I hope not.
No.
Yeah,
Well,
but I suppose I'll have to.
You will.
Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure too. Cheers.
Good man. There's Jonathan Davis, who is talking about these figures today from the Institute of Financial Studies that predict that households will be 20% worse off by 2021. The message is, it's going to get worse.